Well, hello, lovely listeners. Today I have the wonderful Mike Lane Evans. Mike is a presentation and communication coach. He does public speaking. He helps startup companies improve their investor pitches so they get a lot more money. And he's also helped 1,000+ people make more impact by staying authentic. Authenticity is one of my top core values, Mike. So I like that. But Mike used to be on the West End, excuse me, used to be on the West End and had some issues there, which I'm sure he'll talk about. And this is what sort of transitioned him into what he does now. He's also worked as a consultant with the British military, and you are an International Coaching Federation accredited coach, and you have your own company called Forefront Coaching. So, welcome, Mike. It's a real pleasure to have you on today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Mel.
You're very welcome. So I love to learn, and the listeners love to learn more about our guest's backstory. You know, obviously you were on the West End as an actor, as a professional actor. I'm a singer, so I love it when people, are into all the arts and put themselves out there because it's not easy, right? Um, so yeah, so I'd love to hear a bit more about that. But I know that obviously you had some challenges there, which brought you to where you are now. So welcome and take us as far back as you want to go in terms of your story.
Okay, well, I was 8 years old.
Yeah, I knew you were going to
Um,
say that.
yeah, that's when I started acting.
Okay,
So for me, what happened was my uncle turned 40. He got given a video camera, and no one in our family had a video camera. We couldn't afford one, and all the family clubbed together, and he got this video camera. And his son, my cousin, immediately stole it. Like the very next day, or sort of adopted it, shall we say?
yeah, yeah,
Uh, And every school holidays, we would make movies. We would make like fake commercials. We would make Doctor Who episodes. We would make movies that we just kind of created. And there were six cousins, but the real passion lay with me and him. He is now a director of a film company, and I became an actor. And so
amazing.
really, like, yeah, it informed so much about who we were and what we were about. And so I did that for 24 years from that point, from when I was 8 years old. At some point when I was 12, someone told me that I could be paid to do it, and I was locked in. Uh, as I get to do all of this fun and be paid. And so then I did that until my early 30s. And I had a year in 2017 where I just kept failing. My career had kind of gotten to a point where I was getting some really big auditions, some sort of Hollywood, level auditions, and I just couldn't perform. I just couldn't go in and do what I had practiced, what I'd rehearsed, what I was sort of ready to do. It just wouldn't happen in the room. And even worse than that, I just wasn't connecting with the casting director or the director or whoever's in the room. It was so wooden, not just in performance, but in terms of personality. And that's just, I felt like I wasn't being myself.
So quick question on that. So you got to a certain level with Hollywood style whatevers, and so were you in like, musicals or anything like that that we would know before that point?
So I was never a singer, sadly. I was one of the people at a theatre school that by the middle of the third year, the head of music just sort of gave up and said, "It's okay, you can just watch." Um, the theatre school I went to was a drama school, and so singing was sort of a part of it, but not the majority of it. And so yeah, the kind of West End level shows that I did were Shakespearean shows at Shakespeare.
Okay.
And I did the kind of most West Endy show was the 39 Steps. So for listeners who are not aware of that, it's a movie that's been made 4 or 5 times. And there was a West End show that was very much as a farce, a comedy, quite very fast paced, and that ran for 9 or 10 years. So I did a year on that.
Hmm.
Uh,
So,
uh,
and why
yeah.
do you why do you think because I'm interested in this when you said, you just weren't connecting, you weren't getting through, you felt a bit wooden or whatever. Do you think it was just purely lack of self-belief and confidence? Because I know that I've struggled with that on and off all my life. So what do you think it was for you?
It was a number of things. Some of those I resolved through therapy. It was less about there have been moments in my life, of course, when it comes down to confidence. But it was less, I would say, in this case, specifically about confidence and more about self-worth.
Mm,
I didn't feel that I was good enough or deserving of doing those things. So an example I can give you, I was up to play 3 or 4 scenes against Paul Rudd, who is an actor that is in my sort of top five. I think he's seems like a really lovely guy as well, and the pressure was just too much. Like it was the idea of being at that point. The thing I figured out with therapy though was that I had when I'd started out, I never wanted to be famous.
mm,
And the problem is, once you leave theatre school, every sort of direction is in that, or every sort of
yeah,
meeting, audition, job is sort of aiming in that direction, I should say. And the reason is because there'll be actors who are watching this or listening to this saying, Mike, you're absolute, that's BS, that's not true. For me, there are certain actors who will only do theatre for their whole life. And the majority of those, they earn, there's a ceiling to what you can earn. And unfortunately, the way that theatre has gone both in the West and in Broadway is if you want to earn those higher salaries, you first need to do TV and film, become more of an established household name, and then you'll get a salary that's 10, 20, 30 times higher than your colleagues. And that's genuinely true. And that's sort of fine to a point. It's a model that everybody understands. And so most people then want to go and do a Netflix show or Game
yeah.
of Thrones or something like that. And I didn't realize for the longest time that I just really didn't want that in my life. I really didn't want to. We went out for lunch one day in Soho, near all the West End theatres for those non-Brits listening. And my sister, there was a celebrity just 2 tables over, and my sister just sort of lifted her phone and started to take pictures. And I told her off. I said, like, if you want a picture, go and ask him, go and pose
Yeah.
with him. Like, he's a person, he's a human. And just because he's famous and good at what he does, doesn't mean that we can just sort of like dehumanize him. And my sort of discussion went on to say, like, both of my sisters, I have 2 younger sisters, and at the time they both really wanted to be mothers. Thankfully, now they both are wonderful mothers. And I said, for me, the idea of somebody doing that to us, whilst nieces and nephews are sat at this table, is unacceptable.
Mm,
And I think there were loads and loads of little moments like that for me with friends who were quite famous and, other situations like that where people would take photos. And it just chipped away and made me realize I really didn't want that lifestyle. And so when I got those opportunities, I was
mm.
failing.
Like
However,
self-sabotage, isn't it?
self-sabotage.
Yeah.
But the thing is that self-sabotage is one of the causes of what happened to me. I would go into these rooms and I would kind of give what I felt like was 60% of my personality and ability. And as soon as I walked out the door, and genuinely, I phoned, I can't remember who, but I phoned somebody once because I was 10 meters out the door and I felt the rest of it come back. So I ended up just phoning a mate or probably my mom and was just like, I don't know what's going on here. And anyway, I did a lot of research at the time. I was working with the British military, consulting and communication for them. And much like lots of industries, it's sort of a bit of a parallel universe. You've got to communicate in slightly different ways, certainly to the arts and the acting industry.
Mm,
And so when you're figuring those things out and different ways to communicate in different cultures, I started to explore things for myself. And I found this study in the UK that said 83% of people had experienced what I had experienced, which is I'm intending to do this, but I'm
mm,
only achieving this, and I don't know why. And sometimes that's self-sabotage, sometimes that's confidence, sometimes that's self-awareness. There are lots of different factors, other people listening to this, it won't be the same things I went through, but that the sort of outward thing is really, really common. And so I decided to do something about that to help other people. I started doing presentation coaching. It was an obvious kind of step, and it worked really nicely alongside my acting career. And then I got to a point where I was enjoying the coaching way more than I was the acting. And it was just a natural transition to, yeah, start my own business. I'm fully qualified, as you said, as
Mm.
a ICF coach, International Coaching Federation coach, um, to kind of broaden our offerings, really, to and learn a lot more skills, because I was like, okay, I've got these experiences and I want to help other people through those, but I can't just suddenly decide I'm great at coaching because I was a good actor or a failed actor. so,
Yeah.
so, so yeah, so that was what happened 2 years ago, and when I started Forefront Coaching.
So it was 2 years you started. How did you get to work with the British military as a consultant? Was that something from your, I don't know, your education background or?
It was from my acting. So the very start of it was that, um, and this is not exclusive to the military either. There are lots of industries where when it's time for promotions, and they sort of do promotions, they bring in actors to role play. And
Oh, right.
because it might be that you're being promoted to a role that's going to have a lot more responsibility. There's going to be a lot of intense moments in leadership. And so you get put through quite a lot of testing. And so my very first work with the military was as an actor. And then all of those kind of training scenarios always had a facilitator, they had a trainer. And so I started to see more and more of what they were doing, and was just really excited by that work. So eventually started to take on those roles as a trainer and a facilitator, and worked across Triforces in lots of different courses that they offer as well, which, yeah, I loved. I would definitely
Mm.
do that.
Okay. Cool. So then obviously 2 years ago, Forefront Coaching. Was it a bit scary doing this, going on your own, creating your own company and
Yeah,
mm,
100%. So the transition, when I was doing the presentation coaching, I was doing that for a friend's business, and she, just trying to remember what year it was, 2021, she was on maternity, and she asked me to run the business while she was gone, and it was a real compliment, and I was happy to do so. And I learned a lot about running a business that I didn't know. A lot of actors are running businesses, but nobody ever taught them how to run the business,
yeah.
uh, and that causes a lot of issues for them. Um, so yeah, I learned a lot about running a business the hard way in 2021. And when my friend came back from maternity, we started talking about partnering. And it, long story short, she said, I want to have another child, and it's really not fair on you to partner, because it won't be a 50-50 split for the next 3, 4, 5 years,
Yeah.
which is just one of the most generous and like humble things anyone's ever said to me, really. And she said, I really think you should do your own thing. And that was terrifying. And I realized that not only did what was really important to me was community and other people to work with, uh, to fail with and to succeed with, um, but also, yeah, suddenly starting on my own, without any kind of backup, as it were, was really scary. But at the time, it was just sort of, I was loving the work so much, and it wasn't gonna keep growing in the way I wanted it to, where I was. So I just had to make that step. I'll be honest though, the reason that I um, studied to become an ICF coach was because I'd had some coaching myself, and that definitely was what helped me to kind of bridge that gap,
Mm,
to set, not just being sort of thrust into it, but going, I can do this, and I know I can do this. So yeah, it helped with that fear, because fear is a good thing if you've got some level of support through it. If you're just terrified all the time and you've got nobody supporting you, it can be obviously very lonely.
yeah. Absolutely. So how did you sort of produce what you've what you focus on now, who is your sort of main audience, and how did all that come about in terms of the package and your offering now?
So one of the clients that I had built up a lot at my previous company was an accelerator program that runs globally. So for anyone listening who hasn't heard of an accelerator program, it's like a mini university. Usually they run for 3 or 6 months, and they are for startups, small businesses of usually less than 10 people that have been going a year or two. And they really need some support, and they need a cash injection as well. And so they go and join one of these programs. And so we worked with them a lot, and I continued to work with them. And again, my friend very generously had suggested I take them with me to the new company. What I discovered was that working with that many startups again and again and again was a real opportunity for me to make a change, because before I'd stopped acting, I was doing a show. It was a true story, really dark, horrible true story. And it was so dark that they brought counselors in, therapists, to
Wow.
make sure that we were okay.
I
And
need to know what this true story is now.
yeah, yeah, I can tell you. It's so if anyone ever wants to look it up, it's called Stalking the Bogeyman, or Boogeyman, because it's an American production. It was set in Alaska, where the story really happened, and it was written by a guy who was abused growing up, sexually abused. And he was sexually abused by so his parents had another couple that they were sort of best friends with, and they used to hang out with regularly. And he was only 8 years old, but the other couple's son was 16, 17 throughout this time period. And he, as part of his recovery, if you will, wrote the story. He co-wrote it with a theatre writer, and they did it in Alaska, and then they did it in Broadway, and then they brought it to the West End. And one of the actors came with the production, and then they recast the rest of it. And I had the privilege, I guess, to be in it. But it was really, really difficult. And I mean, I'll be really vulnerable with you and tell you that. So I was playing the abuser. I was playing the older son,
Oh, wow.
the older boy who was the abuser, and the the questions that I would sort of ask myself is, well, why am I doing this first of all?
Yeah.
And also, I'd not long been in the 39 Steps, which I previously talked about, which was this raucous comedy, and that's entertainment. And a
Yeah.
lot of acting is entertainment. Like you mentioned musical theatre before, it's you go and you have a really fun night a lot of the time.
Mm.
But I realized that for me, what the productions I'd really loved the most were ones that had started a conversation and brought about some change. And this show that we did, excuse me if I well up a little bit, I didn't realize that was going to happen. The show that we did 6 nights of Q&A afterwards. And every single night, there were people who had suffered sexual abuse had come to the show. And nearly every night, there was somebody who told the audience in the Q&A, and it was the first time they had ever told anybody in their life, apart from the person that had brought them, who was sitting next to them. So in one case, that was like a parent. In one case, a couple of cases, it was a partner, like a boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife. And they never told anybody else. And then they're telling a room of, not everyone would stay for the Q&A, so it was usually about 60 people. And they'd be telling 60 people suddenly.
Yeah.
And it started this amazing conversation every night, and it really started to bring about some change, or at least it felt like it did. And that's why I loved the work with the military.
Yeah.
And that's what I loved about working with startups. I still do. It's people that, usually, not in all cases, usually have this incredible idea and very little knowledge of how to communicate that idea, how to incentivize and inspire people to buy it or to invest in it. And so that has been the sort of bread and butter of Forefront Coaching. And it's grown so much that we've now got 3 other coaches that work for Forefront as well. And we've got a back end team that supports that. And then we realized we didn't accidentally realize, it became very apparent. Lots of people came to us and said, this isn't just an issue for startups. Small and medium businesses, large businesses have ginormous communication issues that your practices, your training, your coaching could really support. And so we've developed like multiple different programs now for different sort of size businesses to help. And of course, the startups is still our sort of love, because it's where we can make a really big difference.
Yeah. So what does that actually look and sound like if you were, let's take an example of a startup versus maybe an example in a corporate company or whatever. What does your program look like in terms of being able to take people, or I don't know whether it's departments that you work with or whatever, in terms of whatever this improvement in communication, how do you sort of facilitate that?
So there's a number of different ways that they can sort of start their journey. They can sort of jump into different points. The sort of the full journey, if you will, is, let's take a business who, and this I can, in fact, I won't name them but I
Yeah.
can tell you specifically about a business. Last year, they thought up the idea in July. They sort of came up with a name and registered it, well, the last week of July, and immediately applied for an accelerator program, which started on September the 9th or 10th. So they're in this program. Now, a lot of these programs have businesses that are more well established, but this is a business that is not much more than an idea. There's a couple of people that are running it, and they're starting to develop the technology, and they're starting to do this thing, but they don't have a business as such.
Mm,
They've named it, they've registered it, they've got a landing page on a website, but there's so much more to a business. And one of the things, if I can go back just slightly, that I discovered that was happening to me in 2017 was a bit of a lack of um, strength of character, if you will. But it was, I was allowing myself to be what I thought other people wanted me to be.
mm,
I was going into these rooms and assuming stuff and saying, oh, well, they need the serious guy, or they need the kind of really professional guy, or whatever. I just wasn't being myself.
mm.
So you've got to have that, like there's a term lots of people like to use now, that your personal brand, right? Like it's, and
Yeah.
like for me, what that really means is like understanding like who you are, what are your non-negotiables, what's important to you in life, and where do you want to get to, not at the end of your life, but just next, in the next year or 2 years or whatever it might be. And not settling, not to kind of jump on you, yeah, but like don't just settle for like, oh well, that came to me easily, that was the low hanging fruit. Actually, like what are those things that you're really driving for? So with businesses, with startups, a lot of time they'll create something, and they'll then, like, someone will want it, and they were great. Okay, so now that person is in legal. They're in the legal sector. So now we're a product for legal. But we didn't set out to be for legal. We don't really know anything about legal. We're not particularly passionate about legal. If anything, my business partner has had some awful stories and experiences, those sorts of things. And so what happens a lot of the time is that people don't build the brand. They don't set the foundations of the house before they start trying to build the house. And 80% of startups fail within their first 12 months.
Mm,
I actually read an article last week that said that's gone up to like 84, 85% in the last couple of years. But it was an American article, so I don't know how that sort of transpired globally. Um, but it's in that region of businesses that fail, and some of those major factors are not understanding. So right at the beginning, business coaching, sitting down, the answers to all of the questions are inside the founders of the business, but they often don't have the time or even the access mentally to the questions. So they can't come up with the answers because they don't know what the questions are. And so a really good coach's job is listening, being there with you and guiding you through that journey and asking you those poignant questions, so the answers come from you. And so that really helps those businesses to then establish a full foundation so they can carry on building the house. And then what we do along that journey is we then help you take what we've just figured out together, sort of back of house, if you will, to how do you tell a story to other people that motivates them and excites them, engages them. And then how do you turn that into a full business pitch? So not just the storytelling that you could tell to someone on a podcast or at a networking event, but actually then how do you stand on stage or on a Zoom call with a potential client or an investor, and what do you do there? And what are the visuals and the design elements that you need to go along with that, as well as the verbal? And then built in with all of that as we go further along the journey is, what do you do with this? How do you use your body language, your tone of voice, your energy, all of the other stuff outside of just figuring out the content and the wording? And then even beyond that is like bringing that all together, because they're not separate things. They're all
Mm.
just you. And that might just sound like, well, we could do all that in an hour or two, but it's not that simple for people. It's a journey of sort of
Yeah.
exploration, if you will. And so when it comes to startups, that's sort of the initial journey. But then a lot of them come back because they then grow and they need us to support communication for their wider team. So we do managing difficult conversations or helping through times of change, things like redundancies or difficult times that happen within a business. And we come in and help them with that as well. So we sort of stay with a lot of I mean, we've only been going 2 years, but some of our startups have grown quite fast. And so they've sort of come back for that further support already.
Mm. Amazing. Yeah. I mean, there's obviously lots of different coaching companies. Coaches. I'm a coach, but I'm very much, individuals. You're in the corporate world, in the startup world, and all of that. And a friend of mine was working for another company similar to yours, but more looking at C-level, C-suite, and more about the leadership stuff, whereas you're more about the communication. And it always intrigues me because I'm just like, wow, how do like a series of events got you to where you are now?
Yeah.
Um, it was your friend's business really that sort of gave you that lever or that bridge over.
Yeah.
And then because of her circumstances, it's opened up for you and it just happens to align with who you are, and what you care about, and the fact that acting wasn't going to be your be all and end all because you didn't want that privacy intrusion.
Yeah.
So it's fascinating to me, but and when I talk to different coaches and different coaching companies about that's like it's like a little niche there, isn't it, that I would never have even thought about. But your experience and the events that have led you to where you are now have made all of that just possible. Um,
Yeah.
and almost seamless. It probably wasn't seamless, and I don't mean to
No,
belittle it at all, but do you know what I mean? That's what it feels like.
it's
Uh,
just funny. One of the things I say to our clients, in fact, one of my marketing guys just pushed me for the fourth time yesterday and said, I want some quotes that I can use. And one of the things that I often say to people is never lie, always tell the positive version of the truth when you're selling, when you're talking about your business or your experiences. And so yeah, like my story sound, there were positive steps along the way, but of course there were struggles within that. When I was failing at acting for over a year, it was about 18 months, it definitely didn't feel easy at the
no,
time, you know.
no.
um but yeah, I agree with you that there's an element of luck, at least with my friend kind of bringing me into her business.
Is it luck or is it alignment? I like to, people say, oh, you create your own look, and it depends on your terminology and what words you use. But ultimately, yeah, okay. But you were friends with this lady because there was a synergy with with your personalities, your energy, and all the rest of it, and probably similar values and similar vision. Um, and the universe conspired and put you together in a time where, you were able to then, create this other world for yourself, really, which is amazing. I'm always intrigued by stuff like that. So you're 2 years in, and have you got any sort of big plans, or is it a case of at the moment, you're sort of ramping up where you're at? What's sort of next for you guys?
Yeah, we have. So what we've been fortunate that now, when you said about C-suite and those larger businesses, like we're working with that level, if you will, on communication as well. So it's the sort of forefront's about communication sort of across the spectrum, and what that sort of the sort of bigger the business that you get in, the more that kind of affords you to be able to sort of do some of the passion projects, I guess, if you will. And what is really important to us is that the stuff that we offer is accessible to everybody. And so we're building a couple of things to make it accessible to people that don't have C-suite money, or even kind of huge investment that the startups have had. So in end of November, beginning of December, we're launching a learning management system, which is basically a package, a tool that people can buy of going through all of our sort of our training and coaching, but sort of in sort of video form that sort of is more accessible.
Mm.
And then next year, all being well, we are launching an accelerator program of our own, focused on, in the UK to start with, 18 to 30-year-olds from lower socioeconomic backgrounds. So what we see a lot, having worked across 6 continents and a number of different socioeconomic backgrounds, is that the sort of general path still is that if you come from a background that's, you know, got less access to investors and big clients and things, one of the best steps you can take is to go to university and grow your sort of network, and then go and work for some big company, like some big bank, and grow your network even more and get access to these people. So 10 years, 11 years down the line, you can finally do the thing you wanted to do when you were 17, 18.
Mm.
So, but for people like I grew up in a middle class family, and I did go to university, but there were certain opportunities available to me if I hadn't done. And so a lot of people sort of in the middle classes in the UK are choosing to not go to university
Yeah.
anymore. It's not a necessity anymore. And yet there's still a lot of people that, if they want to kind of grow and change their lives, that's a path that's sort of still there. So we want to help, and we want to provide access to people and access to opportunity and financing money for people with these incredible ideas without them having to wait 10 years. But that's next year, and I like talking about it on podcasts,
Mm.
because we're looking for partners, we're looking for funding for it, and it's not for me being here to sell in that kind of money way, but to say, if people are interested in providing these opportunities to everybody, then yeah, let us know.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Um, well, that's a very admirable vision, because the gap between rich and poor seems to be getting ever bigger. The education system, I've got my own thoughts on that one, and I don't blame people for not going to university anymore. I just don't. I feel personally, given the feedback that I'm seeing out in the world, that it's not fit for purpose anymore. I think for me, I mean, it was a long time ago for me, but I did go to university. Um, I think it probably held me back really in terms of what I could have been doing, but I just followed the norm, and thought this was a good thing to have on my CV. That's what you think, right? It's going to open more doors, and it probably did open more doors in terms of the corporate world. But did it open my creativity and my entrepreneurship? No, that came later. So yeah, so to have companies like you that are focusing on that, and also making it more accessible to people that don't, like you said, don't have a network, don't have these contacts, is fantastic. So good for you.
How long, if it's okay to ask you a question, how long post the kind of traditional route did you change that route? Like, how long did it sort of take you to make that decision?
Yeah, my journey, I've always been a late developer, Mike. But my journey, I ended up getting pregnant when I was 25, when I just started my first proper corporate role, because I did university way longer than everybody else. And at that point, I think, because I was also in a rock pop band, which had to go when my son was about 18 months old, I think it was, or 2 years old. I was like, I can't do all of this anymore. And there was always an ambition in me, but it wasn't it wasn't really burning through me when I was sort of 18 to 22. That was more about, oh, I think I want to be a psychologist. That was the dream of the time. And then I sort of fell into sales. But for me, it was more about seeing what was in my own world, my parents who were not set up for old age. Um, I'd always had this desire to earn a lot of money because I'd seen my parents argue every night about money. So I had some internal drivers that sort of made me see things differently. And then I suppose, once Jake was, a little bit older, I was just like, I've got to do something about this. And then, I started to get these things through the door about property and lease properties and all of that. And that's what sort of started me. I think I was probably about 27, 28 when I started to seriously look at it. Um, and I think back now and I'm like, what a shame I didn't sort of feel like that 10 years earlier. But everything happens for a reason, and it's all in divine time. And I'm a big believer in that. And like I said, I always seem to be a bit of a late developer as well. Um, the sort of penny drops for me years after other people, but that is what it is. So yeah, does that answer the question?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in my opinion, 27, 28 is not late. I mean, I guess 32, 33 before I made my change. But I think what I really like about your stuff is that you can be happy in something and still make a change.
Mm,
Like it doesn't, you don't have to wait until like you had a good life with Jake and, and then you found this thing that's kind of helped you to, to grow and develop
yeah,
in yourself. And, yeah, I also think like people listening to the podcast, like there's a lot of this in the acting industry, particularly like Morgan Freeman. Like if anyone knows who that actor is, or Google him, he didn't start till he was 50.
oh,
Um,
seriously, right, okay.
yeah, and like Ricky Tomlinson, who's the dad from Royal Family, he was late 40s to mid 50s. I can't remember the exact age. Um, and it's not just, an acting industry thing. Like it's that I just know those references really well because they did it for so long. And yeah, I think it's really exciting that we live in a time where you don't like my grandparents, you picked a job and you did it for life. And you've already done something different and then you set up a podcast and yeah, I find that really exciting for
Yeah,
anyone to do.
thank you. And thanks for the questions. Doesn't happen very often on here. Um, so okay, well, it's been a real pleasure to get to know you over these last 40 minutes or so. If people listening want to reach out to you, are interested in what you're offering, want to find out a little bit more, where's the best place for them to go?
So our website is forefront-coaching.com. So dash forefront-coaching.com. My name is Mike Lane Evans. I got married last year, and so it's a double-barreled surname, Lane Evans. Neither of us ever thought we'd do a double-barreled, but neither of us wanted to give up our name, so that we are where we are. And as far as I know, I'm the only Mike Lane Evans in the world or on social media, so fairly easy to find on LinkedIn, and our Forefront coaching page on LinkedIn as well is very fairly easy to find. Until 6 weeks ago, I have been so about coaching and my clients that you will see if you go to our LinkedIn that traditionally I've not been very good with a public forum. And now I've got a marketing and sales team who are really doing stuff about that. And as another offering that we've got, there's a lot of content coming on social media that's just free. We're not asking for anything. We're not saying, "Oh, here's a little," because I hate the kind of sales where it says, "Oh, here's a little bit," but if you want to know more, it's we just want to give there's videos, there's tips and tools and skills and things to just access, even if you never even follow us,
Mm,
connect with us on LinkedIn. There's stuff like that. So yeah, they're the best places to find us at the moment.
okay, cool. And obviously I'll put that in the show notes as well. So I always finish these conversations with anything you feel called to share before we finish, whether it be a quote or whether it be a pearl of wisdom or whatever comes to mind for you.
Um, I think I, whenever there's so many quotes that I want to tell you, but I can't remember the specific ones. So I'm not going to go down a quote and I'm going to go for Pearl of Wisdom. And I think like there are certain podcasts where I'm not really sure why the name is called the name. I don't know why the podcast is called that. And I feel like yours is brilliantly, I mean, there's sort of no question about what it's about. And so I assume like the listeners like come into this, have decided for some reason they don't want to settle. And I think like sometimes we don't have the opportunity to figure out like sometimes I think we can get in this sort of idea of I'm not going to settle, I want this thing. And that can also cause you to burn bridges or cause you to kind of have this sort of ripple effect, if you with the butterfly effect of actually like disassociating or affecting other relationships or other things that are going on for you. And so I think for me, the biggest thing that I've mid running my business, so a couple of months ago, I went away for 2 days on my own, turned my phone off. It was meant to be three, and business was too busy, so it ended up being two. And just walked and just let myself kind of figure out like, what matters next. What are the things that I really want next, so that I understand whether I'm settling or not. And I think for parents or people like of young children, parents of young children who are watching this or listening to this and going, yeah, all right, I wish I could go away for 2 or 3 days. Figure out your version of it is what I would say. Like if you're lucky enough to have a parent or something that can have the kids for a couple of hours, take that time and dedicate it in that way. If it's just going to the toilet for 15 minutes, like whatever that time is, but figure out some times in your week and in your month where you can figure out what are your non-negotiables so you understand what you're settling or not settling about. That would be what.
Yeah, yeah, very important. So many, and it's, especially for the younger generation now, there is so many distractions. Everything's on demand, as we know, and we've seen it all the time, haven't we? You're out on the streets walking, and everyone's got their head down looking at the phone, and it's just such a sad state of affairs, as far as I'm concerned. And so the younger generation, especially, don't have the communication skills that I was afforded being a 70s, baby. We had a lot more freedom. And yeah, and that really saddens me. So then you get to a point where it's just noise, 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 isn't it? And there is no downtime. There is no, like you said, even if it's 15 minutes in the bathroom, of just giving yourself that presence. It is great that more people are realizing that meditation is a good thing to do now, which gives you that space. But I think we've got a long way to go on that one. So yeah, great advice. Thank you very much, Mike. It's been lovely to meet you, and congrats on the wedding last year.
You.
And yeah, it's been a great conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Cheers.